Select few franchises can be gone for so long and then immediately hit it out the park on their return. Mad Max Fury Road might be the best example of this feat. Not only is it a phenomenal action-packed post-apocalyptic sci-fi movie, but it's arguably the best Mad Max, period. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a sci-fi movie. I almost flubbed that word, but that's okay. We're doing it live. Not
Are
really.
we?
But
Oh God.
It's the spirit of live, the essence of live. Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Mad Max Fury Road. We have obviously been working through the Mad Max movies over the past few months because there's a new one coming out in May. So this is our last stop before the new entry. This is the big return to the franchise in 2015. Had a lot of hype surrounding it as it was coming out. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do, and we'll give you some warning before we go into spoilers if you happen to have not seen it and just want a general idea of our feelings and what to expect. Before we get started, though, I'll just remind you that you can, of course, hit the like button if you're on YouTube, if you're enjoying the show. It helps out a bunch. And, of course, you can get some bonus shows with me and David over on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about them at the end. Oh, also, David goes back and watches another sci-fi movie for homework that he talks about at the end. So
Yes, I do. I give myself extra work because I hate myself in a lot of ways.
Makes two of us.
Nah. You hate me too?
Well, it's less funny that you're spelling it out. It was a funny snipe on its own. Now you're just... Yeah.
No, I get it. I just wanted to clarify that you're being mean for no reason.
I mean, that's just... I don't know. It's a day ending in Y, so, I mean, yes. But yes, welcome everyone. Mad Max Fury Road, it very much pitched as it was coming out as effectively one big chase, and with a little bit of setup, that is effectively what it is in a lot of ways. Of course, we have lost Mel Gibson because it was, 25 to 30 years since the previous movie. So Tom Hardy steps in as Max. We also have another main character called Furiosa, which might sound familiar because the new movie coming out is called Furiosa.
Oh, I just got that. That makes sense.
David.
Oh, I'm not allowed to make a joke there? All right. Sorry. I'll sit here and just agree with what you say for the rest of the episode.
That's not what I was trying to get at when I was saying David.
Totally right. You're definitely not getting at that.
I was playing along and saying, yes, you're dumb.
Yep, absolutely. I agree.
Excellent then. All right, let's move on. Charlize
You're
Theron.
so handsome.
Charlize Theron plays Furiosa. And then there's a lot of other faces in here as well. There's a lot of faces that pop up in other things that like weren't as big at the time. So they kind of, you sort of like notice some faces when you're watching it now. Because it's been 9 years. Believe it or not, it's been 9 years since this came out.
Yep.
Time is moving. But you hadn't seen this, so I am very curious as to what your general feelings are.
Yeah, no, obviously I remember all the hype. I remember everyone being like, oh my God, it's just like nonstop action. It looks great. It's fantastic the way they handle this stuff. And I'm like, all right, but I never saw the original Mad Max, so I didn't feel like I was qualified and go see this movie because I'm the kind of guy who feels like he has to watch the previous installments before he goes for a new one. Even if it doesn't say that it's necessary, I still feel like I should. So I just skipped over it, and coming back to it now, seeing it for the first time here, I get it. Like, I 100% understand the hype behind this. It looks fantastic the whole way through, and I would say that this movie, it just kind of furthers in my mind that George Miller's some kind of wizard. Like, I watched this movie and I compare it with like all the other things that have come out around that same time and since. And I don't get how he managed to get away with half the stuff he did in this movie. Like, by all rights, it shouldn't work. There is a huge amount of day for night shots in this movie. Like, there are no night shots. It's all day for night. But I don't care. Like, it works. And it works so well in the stylized nature of the movie. So yeah, no, it was a fun ride the whole way through, pun definitely intended. So, yeah, no, I liked it.
Yeah, it's excellent. I remember thinking it looked good from the trailers. and then it was a hell of a time actually seeing it when it came out. And it's been a while. In fact, it might have even been 2015 the last time I saw this, until I watched it today for the show. So it was fun going back in and remembering why. I remembered a lot of big moments, but like I'd forgotten maybe some of the why certain things happened or what the lead into certain things were. I remembered the broad strokes of the story, but maybe not all the details. So it was a fun sort of revisiting. Funny thing actually is that other than maybe the day for night stuff, but which I do notice and do think is a bit of a weird choice. The weakest part of the movie for me, and I always say this now, having gone back and watched it again, is probably the opening few minutes, because I started the movie and it felt really like hyperkinetic, like it was moving so fast through this little introduction, and then up until the title screen, which is a badass title screen to be fair.
Oh yeah,
I was watching it today and I was like, am I going to be like disappointed and this isn't as good as I remembered? And the short answer is no, it was as good as I remembered. It's just that the rest of it's so goddamn fantastic and special that starting it again when it's a bit hazy in my memory, it's just these opening couple of minutes are really kind of like rushed to get. It's like, oh, we're doing all this stuff where Max is being chased through tunnels by the war boys, and it feels really kind of, I don't know, just everything feels sped up and kinetic, like I said, and it just feels like it's not got that same pacing that the rest of the movie has. But once you actually get into building what the real movie is, once like, okay, this is where we are now, we're building up Furiosa, what her plan is, what she's doing, who the villain is, of course, we've not even talked about Immortan Joe yet, but we'll get into all that, mostly in spoilers, but it, like, once you actually start getting into building that, like, the pacing's immaculate. The action, as much as it can be, is practically done with stunts and, like, you know, practical effects. It's not... Obviously, there are some green screen moments, there are CG, because there's certainly things you can't do without it, right?
I'm very surprised that they actually chopped off Charlize Theron's arm for this movie. That was a lot of character acting going into that. Yes.
She's been walking around with one arm because she was that committed to the role. I mean, joking aside here, by all accounts, I mean, I've not looked into it too deeply, but apparently the production of this movie was, like, basically a gauntlet of torture. And they all hated each other by the time they finished making it.
I'm sure. From what I looked into the same stuff as you did, basically what it seemed like it came down to is George Miller was not very good at getting the actors to understand the vision he had in his head. And so he just basically told them, like, now do this, now do that. And the actors were like, okay, but like, why? What are we even shooting here? And it was only once they saw it on screen, they're like, oh, okay, we get it, George. We forgive you.
Yeah, I'm sure, because obviously sometimes you get hellish shoots where they eventually see the finished film and they must go, yep, that's a bit what I expected based on that mess of a production. But I do wonder what it's like to like feel like you have no idea what's going on for most of the production and then see the finished film and be like, oh, it's actually fantastic. He's a madman.
I might actually get an Academy Award for this. I need to settle down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there was no acting awards or thing, but they did win a bunch of technical awards for this. I remember that being a thing. So yeah, I you know, the music's really good as well. Junkie XL, who has done some music that I've not liked in other movies. You know, he did a lot of Snyder's Justice League stuff.
Is that the same? All right, yeah, that makes sense.
Not very fond of that, but the music here is fantastic. It's you know, it's pounding, it's riveting, all the stuff.
I don't know if you would technically consider it second act yet, but there is a sequence where they're going through a canyon, and there's just this huge, intense, epic score going on that as soon as that scene happened, I wrote down specifically, like, check out the score for this. Like, just listen to it on its own, and I did, and Jesus Christ, that at least that track, because I played that one at least 3 times in a row. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's called Brothers in Arms. I remember that track. I've been listening to it since 2015. It's very good.
Yes. Exactly.
So, yeah, that stuff's fantastic. You get Nicholas Hoult in there as a war boy as well. Some other faces that pop up. Zoe Kravitz is in here.
Can I just take a second on Nicholas Hoult, because it's been such a weird month for me. My girlfriend started watching The Great. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It's essentially a retelling of Catherine the Great in Russian history. It's got Nicholas Hoult as Peter the Great. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember him from X-Men. He was Beast. All right, cool. And then immediately after that, she switched over to watching Skins, which is where Nicholas Hoult essentially got his start in. And I'm like, that's weird. Nicholas Hoult is there twice, but whatever. And then I start up this movie, and I didn't look at the cast list beforehand. And 10 minutes in, hey, look, Nicholas Holt's back. So for the past month, I've basically watched nothing but Nicholas Holt's filmography. And I'm a bit weirded out that he keeps showing up.
You haven't even got to the menu yet.
I haven't. That's probably going to be next.
Which also stars Anya Taylor-Joy, who's playing Furiosa in the next Mad Max movie.
That'll be a good link movie. I might actually do that just to link it over.
We'll brought it all together. Zoe Kravitz is in there. Also, Rosie Huntington Whiteley, who I basically only know from the third Transformers movie, but there she is.
Oh, that's right. That's her. Okay.
Yeah, Abby Lee's in there, who popped up in Lovecraft Country and Neon Demon. Riley Keough? I don't know how you pronounce her last name, to be honest. But she's been in stuff.
Yep. And then obviously the big bad, Immortan Joe, played by Hughes Keys Byrne, which not really a huge name, at least in the acting world, except for the fact that he was the villain from the first Mad Max movie.
That is a nice touch. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, he's the same dude. He just showed up again, and just totally different role, but it again, like, we've had all these recast things over and over again in Mad Max. It feels right. It feels right that we got this link back to the original still.
Yeah. To be fair, though, this one you never recognize. One, because he's much older, and two, because he's wearing a mask, like, over half of his face, like, the entire time, so...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I think it's a better touch to have him than to, say, have Mel Gibson show up for, like, a crowd shot or something like that. Hey,
I'll take, the one from 2, the one that was in Commando, Leslie Vernon, I think his name is.
Oh, yeah.
You could bring him in, He can show up with a mohawk or something.
There was a character of this that was like very, I don't know what the proper term is, but he was like a dwarf who was in like a chair or something like that. They should have brought back Master Blaster. Should have had him show back up.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to get into it and talk through it. I mean, as far as anything else goes, like I say, like if I have any critiques, it's just... Yeah, Day for Night I find a little bit distracting. The opening, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is a little kind of like, we're just going to rush a bunch of like quick exposition just to sort of set the movie up for anyone who isn't familiar with the general premise of Mad Max. But like everything else is basically firing on all cylinders. Like the action is so good. It stands out especially because action in a lot of modern movies kind of sucks. Like there's a lot of...
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of these recent big blockbusters, your Marvel movies and whatnot, the action's pretty lackluster, and this feels like a director who knows how to make action scenes and is very good at it. So it really stands out. And it's one of the more exciting things about the new one coming out is like, oh, hey, we get to have another good action movie out of this.
Yeah, that's... Whenever I watch modern action movies, I can't help but think in the background, like, oh, here's what the choreographers were thinking, and they were doing this stuff. And... like you said, a lot of times in recent action movies, it feels kind of lazy. It feels kind of like either A, oh, we'll fix it in post or we'll add whatever special effects we need, or B, it's just a bunch of quick cuts and you can't actually get an appreciation for what the action actually is. And that's why I feel like when I was watching this, George Miller's just a wizard, where he manages to do, like you said, a movie that is nothing but a giant chase scene, and yet it still has a fully functioning plot. It still has fully fleshed out characters. Everything is just one long action scene, but it tells a full story throughout it. And that is amazing to me.
Yeah. And not to misrepresent the movie. Obviously, it does have peaks and valleys in its pacing. It has to slow down at some point. It has to have quieter moments. But there's always kind of like, we're always on the road. We're always running from the bad guys kind of mentality to it. So... Yeah, we'll just say spoilers because I feel like there's not a whole lot to talk about other than, you know, what we've already said about just how kind of immaculate it is. It's, you know, once again, we're in the wasteland, and there's actually, you know, obviously some of the big roles are Americans or whoever, but there is a surprising amount of the smaller character actors do still have Australian accents. I don't think I really noticed that when I first saw this, but because we'd done the other 3 recently, I was kind of noticing just the little inflections here or there from some of the smaller characters. Because obviously Nicholas Holt's not Australian. Tom Hardy is kind of doing an accent, but it's not. I wouldn't say he's doing an Australian accent. He's doing kind of.
He's somewhere between his own thing and imitating Mel Gibson as like he is today. Not like Mad Max Mel Gibson, but just Mel Gibson as an idea.
As an idea. But no, he has a lot of lines actually. One of the standout or the notable things about not only this but the last couple of Mad Max movies really is that Max doesn't tend to be very chatty. He tends to only speak when absolutely necessary, and he'll go long stretches without uttering a single word.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. So spoilers anyway. So just to get that clear, spoilers from this point on. You have been warned. Yeah. So the movie does an interesting thing because obviously we've kind of got to this point now. We kind of said this with Thunderdome that it's not really about this like extended continuity where everything that was in Mad Max 1 and up until now is all definitely part of the same kind of story. Because here it kind of gets across this idea that, yeah, Max did have a family. He did have at least a child or children that he lost. But you get some quick glimpses of what I'll describe as a ghost in his head. It's like, this is how the movies kind of try to sell that he's mad, is that he's sort of like seeing these ghosts of dead characters in his head.
Yeah, they kept on playing with it throughout these movies, is that Max has some form of trauma, some form of PTSD because of the death of his family. But this is the first time that I feel like it really dives into, okay, but no, he's like actually got hallucinations and stuff. He is seeing things because of that.
Yeah, it seems like it's maybe as worse as it's ever been at the start of the movie, where he's like totally out of it and struggling to even like function and defend himself. Because the movie opens with him just basically being chased by some bad guys, and like he gets captured quite quickly. Don't get me wrong, the poster, the shot of the poster is the opening shot, which is him standing there with the car behind him. I did think it was funny that the car is such a big part of Mad Max, and it's there in this, and there's a couple of almost, I'll call it basically a running joke, where he'll see the bad guys using it and go, hey, that's mine. But it's not like he gets it back at the end of the movie, and he's like, oh, he finally got his car back. It just never like comes to that.
Wasn't that the same thing at Thunderdome? Is that like we opened up the movie with him in his car, and then like within 5 minutes, it's trashed and totaled, and he has to go on his own. I feel like that's just constantly they keep taking the piss out of his car is this big icon, and they're just like, yeah, but now it's gone.
Yeah. I mean, they did get wrecked in 2 as well, but it was quite late in the movie in 2.
Right.
But anyway, so it sets up some interesting world details here, because I guess it's a good place as any to talk about this society, the Citadel that Immortum Joe runs. He's the ruler of this community. And we learn like this in bits and pieces throughout the whole movie. Some of this we don't learn until much later. But the thing we get a sense of right away is that Max is having a bunch of stuff tattooed on his back by these all these like the henchmen, all the sort of soldiers, if you will. They're all called war boys, right? They're all painted white. Some have like a black smear in their sort of forehead, but by and large they're all sort of chalky white, and they're tattooing on his back basically just key medical details or things that make him useful. So one thing, for example, is that he's a universal donor because he's got O negative blood. And it's like, okay, so they're basically just printing on him, this is what he's useful for. It sets up this idea that Immortum Joe treats people like they're resources and they're just products or cattle or possessions. And that's something that obviously tracks throughout how he treats everyone around him, including his milk farm, which is just a bunch of overweight women pumping milk into containers.
Yeah. At the beginning, he lists they're setting up like this convoy thing to go out, and they list all the stuff they're carrying, which includes aqua cola, which turns out to just be water. They say guzzolene, which is obviously gas, and then they say mother's milk, and they never quite explain what that is at the beginning. And I'm like, maybe that's like a drug or something, but no, it's just actual literal breast milk from a human.
Yes, that's literally what it is, and they're just all lined up. They're all just pumping it out, and that's it. Yeah. Honestly, guzzolene, I didn't even get. I think that was supposed to be a different word. I just thought that was like an Australian twang on the word gasoline. I mean, aqua cola is clearly this different weird interpretation of water, but guzzolene sounds close enough that I thought, oh, that's just Australians being quirky. That's all that is.
That's another thing in this movie is that they don't really do like hard curse words. Every once in a while you'll have, like a damn or whatever, but nothing that's actually going to bother the MPAA. But they do have slang. They do have slang words, and I can't tell the difference of what was made up specifically for the wasteland and what's just normal Australian slang.
I think that's fair. That's fair. Obviously, I think that's probably to keep it down to PG-13. Obviously, some of the previous movies were a little bit more like 1 and 2 were more R-rated for sure, and definitely in tone. This manages to keep kind of the tone of the wasteland kind of intact, but it does definitely make it feel like, oh no, you can show this to a 12-year-old and it's it's fine. You get it. But yeah, so this society, they've got these big canyons, right? Where on top of the canyons, they've got enough good soil or whatever that there's actual, there's trees, there's green, there's that stuff. We see inside a little bit at one point, and there's like farming inside where they've got like, obviously they're not actual literally glass houses because it's inside like a cave, but they've got like rows and rows of crops inside. They're using the water. The water itself that they've got access to here has been pumped up from deep inside the earth, right? Like a big well.
Yeah. And that's pretty much his... They specifically say the green and stuff, the mother's milk, all that's cool, but the thing that allows Immortan Joe to have control over people is the fact that he controls the pumps for the water, because that keeps everything else going. And
at first I was, when I first saw it, at least I was thinking, how much water do they actually have? Is that why he's so stingy with it? Because, there's a big scene early on where he turns it on and these three big pipes coming out of the side of the canyon wall all start flowing with water, and all the sick-looking peasants at the bottom are all just holding up like buckets and baskets trying to catch some water. And it's like a big magical moment where he's turned on the water to give to the poor, but then after like 5 seconds he turns it off again, and they're all just like scrounging for the puddles that have formed.
Beating the crap out of each other for their jugs.
Yeah. But it's been later on when they explain where the water comes from that he's literally just pumping it up from somewhere deep in the earth. I went, oh, okay, he's just a prick then, because this is like a I wouldn't say it. I'm not saying you can't like use all of it up, but I feel like it's probably a pretty big supply.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing of if you give the people what they need and you allow them to live comfortably, then you don't have any control over them anymore. Yeah. So it's very intentional for him to just be like, no, you get enough to barely survive on, and even then, a lot of you will still die because you weren't lucky enough to get some this time around. Yeah, and Immortan Joe's got like at least a couple of his big henchmen or generals are his sons. At least they call him Dad. One I'm sure is definitely his son, because a later scene where he talks about a potential young sibling. I think they all are, because I think that's the implication, is that since the fall of everything, which because of a later line that Furiosa said is at least 20 years ago, that the like things started going down. Since the fall of everything, Immortan Joe's had these women, the people who were pumping milk in that, called breeders, which it seems like he's just got a Genghis Khan sort of thing going on, where he's got like 1,000 different sons at any given point. Yeah, he because there's the little guy as well who's kind of like in a chair, like doing a lot of the announcements and stuff, and So this is the thing though, the breeders, like, do you think the women who were pumping the milk used to be like the other breeders in the movie? Because so what we find out is the main plot of the movie is that Furiosa is trying to save this group of 5 women who are the wives/breeders of Immortan Joe, and she snuck them out onto the big truck that she's been tasked to drive. She's meant to be one of his big generals, and she's betraying him to save these other women. So it's actually got a very feminist kind of story at the center of it. And we see glimpses of where they lived before. They were kept kind of locked in this big sort of cave room, effectively. It's a big vault door. Like a full vault. He's got a giant like bank vault door going on. And it does seem like he picks who he thinks is attractive. It's all young, early 20s. And they're, even the way they're dressed, they're all wearing basically just white sheets over the naughty bits, and that's it. Like, it's very clearly that they're kept angelic, and it's something that's pointed out later on when they meet some women from a different community, where the women are like, wait, how are these women so clean and soft, and like clearly they've been pampered in a way that everyone else living in the wasteland is not. But you get a sense that this is not a good thing. They're like this because he keeps them this way, because he treats them like prized possessions that everyone puts in the effort to make sure his wives that he wants to impregnate
I mean, do you think that when they get older, they just get, you're just the milkers now. Like, I'm done with you because you're older. Basically, he's like Leonardo DiCaprio. Once they're over 25, he's bored of them, and he says, go over there and produce some milk.
I'm not saying that the Venn diagram of DiCaprio and Immortan Joe are separate circles. There is some overlap there, and I think that is probably one of the things where as soon as he loses like an attraction to them, I think that he says like, all right, well, you're now in a different class of society. Instead of, having my offspring anymore, we're just going to keep you producing milk for the rest of your life, pretty much. We'll keep you well fed. You won't have to worry about water and such, but you're still essentially just cattle.
Which, yeah, it makes sense why they're all overweight then, because he's probably like, no, they'll produce more milk if they're, heavily like fed and, like you say, like pampered and taken care of. Like someone who's dying of malnutrition isn't going to be like producing a lot of milk, I assume.
Yeah, exactly. Able to give it up.
So, yeah, it really paints a picture, right? And even the first time you see Immortan Joe, like you see like these horrible like welts in his back, and like one of the ward boys is like powdering them and stuff, and they put his stuff on and his big like scary gas looking mask thing on. He's got a whole visual presence. A lot of effort went into the design of this. There's a reason why it was nominated and maybe won. I can't remember exactly which ones it won, but I'm sure costumes and things like that and all that stuff were very well lauded when it came out. Looks great, and yeah, so that's like a lot of what the early stuff sets up. We've brought a couple of details from later on that they mentioned, but that's a lot of that you see at the start of the movie.
Yeah,
when he's making his big announcement to send out Furiosa, because he's sending her out to go to Gastown, which is a local town where they're somehow making more gasoline. Right, or at least they've got a supply of it somehow. They never get into it, and I think that's smart. It's like we're not going to dwell on how they're getting more gasoline, or if it's just some big supply. But there's a group who have gasoline to trade, just like we have milk to trade and stuff.
It strikes me as a development from Mad Max 2, where they had the single like oil well drill going on, and they just are able to keep doing that. That's probably a similar sort of situation to that.
And then the other town that they're supposed to go to is Bullet Town, where they make more ammunition for their weapons. And then we see other things here as well. He has a very kind of strong hold over all the ward boys who look at him as a devout leader. Like, they actually say he will take us to Valhalla. They worship their steering wheels, so it's a big thing when they all grab their steering wheels and hold them up and all that.
The V8 engine sign, I love that.
It's really, they've put a lot of thought into this. They've put a lot of thought into how this society's functioned and how this guy has managed to be a worshipped dictator to all those under him. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's this mix of brutality and mythology where they say, there's a reason they call him Immortan Joe. They actually think that he is immortal and unable to be killed. And yeah, based off of the sort of mythology he built up around himself, that makes sense that they would worship someone like him. But I think the thing that I really, really enjoy about this movie, even more so than the other Mad Maxes, is that it feels like George Miller always had this sort of world mythology in his head regarding Mad Max, of like how he would see like the different like civilizations and clans and whatever else working out. He just never had the ability to fully recognize it. This feels like it's the first time where it doesn't feel like everything on screen has a direct purpose to the plot, and some of it is there just for the purpose of saying like, this is the world of Mad Max. There are things that have developed that we're not just going to fully explain for the sake of what's going on here.
Yeah. There's lots of people with deformities and things like that. Like the guy with the metal nose who is from the gas town. Yes. He's like the ruler of Gas Town because he gets involved later. He's got a big, like, really fat foot. Like, he's a pretty overweight guy in general, but his foot in particular is this big, like, hulking foot. He's clearly got something going on there. I mean, hell, even Nicholas Holt's character's got two little tumors on his neck that he's named and drawn little smiley faces on. Like, it really paints this idea of, like, a lot of the younger people, or not just younger people, but certainly a lot of people in this wasteland have got, radiation problems or things that have came from all these other issues that have ruined the world. So, yeah, super interesting stuff. I love the decision that we get Joe finding out and realizing what's happened before we get to see. Let me rephrase this.
Yeah,
we see Joe's reaction that his wives have escaped or been taken away somehow before we see them in the truck or in the tanker with Charlize Theron, right?
We get Furiosa going off the established route. She just leaves to the side, and she manages to convince every one of the war boys with her that this is intentional. Yeah. And then as they're skewing off to the side, one of the lookouts sees that and alerts Joe, and he just immediately beelines down to the vault like she didn't. She wouldn't dare. And then we see it completely empty inside, and we still don't know what that means yet until I think it's the very next scene where one of them comes up and says like, oh, we can't breathe down there, and we get the feeling like, oh, okay.
Well, you get like a hint because they've left like a message saying we won't have our babies be warlords or something like that. Yeah. So it gives you you get like a taste of it, and then it's not until one of them in their white robe sort of comes up and talks to Furiosa, and she's like, no, get down, they can't see you. Because for a little while here at the start of the movie, the war boys that are with her, they're not in the tanker, they're like in a couple of other cars that are kind of surrounding the tanker, like an escort. And like one of them keeps coming up to her and saying, hey, why are we going off left? He's like, oh, that's the orders. And he's like, all right then, that's the orders. And he sort of like passes that to the others. It's not until the entire fleet of vehicles led by Joe himself like show up like 10 minutes later where they start to question, I think Furiosa might be up to something here.
Wait a minute, hold on now. I think Furiosa may have hornswoggled us a little bit, guys. Let's go ahead and just question this. Yeah. And then immediately she just beats the crap out of all of them. By the way, I don't know if you care. I do have the list of all the Oscars real quick, if you just want to...
Oh, if you want. Yeah, list them off quickly.
So, nominees only, we've got Best Picture, Best Directing, Best Cinematography, Best Visual Effects, and I think that's just for nominees. And then for winning, we have Editing, Costume Design, Hairstyling and Makeup, Sound Mixing, Sound Editing, and Production Design.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yep, all the technical ones.
Yeah. Yeah, to be fair, it is a technical feat, so I think absolutely. It deserved most of them, certainly. The movie from here, so she's veered off path. Joe rallies everyone, and they all go rushing off. And you're probably thinking, how does Max get involved in this? He's not with them. Well, so it turns out some of the war boys every so often need transfusions and things because they're getting sick, they need help. So Max is just being used to give blood to Nicholas Hoult's character, Nux, right? Now, I'm not going to bother going through all the names of a lot of the other characters because honestly, they're all just nonsense names that I never noticed them saying. Like, did you notice that Zoe Kravitz was called Toast the Knowing?
Not at all. No. I do want to call out, though, Rictus Erectus, which is the son of Immortan Joe, who's like his second in command, because that name is just beautiful. All the women that are being saved, the wives, they all have weird names. Like Huntington Whiteley's character is the splendid Angharad. Angharad, yeah, which honestly threw me for a loop at one point because I thought I was just missing a character because Immortan Joe, when he sees her later on, says like splendid. It's like, and it's clear that he's calling out her name. Like it's obviously that's the name. But then later on, another character calls her Angharad, and I'm like, so wait, what's her name then? I don't know, because there's another character whose name just the Dag, and that's all that anyone ever calls them. So
that's Abilene character, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very unclear here when we got to that character. I'm like, are there two people that just happen to both look identical here? One is named Splendid and one is Angharad.
There's also Capable and Cheeto the Fragile.
I like Cheeto. Not because she's a good character, but just because she's named Cheeto. That's like such a stupid name for me.
Yeah, a bunch of wacky names. And the movie's proud of the names because when it gets to the credits at the end, it gives you all of their names in the titles. It doesn't just obviously you always get the character names in the scroll, but even in the titles beforehand, with every single cast member, it gives you the character name with it. So yeah. Anyway, so part of the plan here is that Furiosa's ridden off into another like tribe's territory, right? Which they do react to. So these are and I'm not even talking about the canyon yet, but even before they get to canyon, there's just like random like bandits who are in this part of the desert who I'm going to refer to as the Spiky Boys, because all their vehicles have got spikes on them.
I agree. They are the Spiky Boys. I think they're implied to be like Russian.
Really? Okay.
I remember they're like some of the names they were saying there were like very Russian sounding. I don't know if that has a reason for that, but yeah.
Yeah, they've got like there's just a little beetle car, but they've just like covered it in these big metal spikes, so it just looks dangerous. And this is where we get our first real taste of like action in the movie. This is where we get some like actual explosions and car flippings, and it does look good. And it's it's Furiosa driving the tanker. But at this point, she's still getting help from the entourage, the other war boys that are with her, because they we're defending the tanker for Joe, our father and our Messiah,
glorious leader.
Yeah. So that's actually a lot of action coming from them, and there's a lot of we get the sense that they're very willing to sacrifice themselves in the name of Joe and protecting what's his.
Well, that's where the meme line from this movie comes from, is that they've essentially glorified their own deaths. They see that when they die, they'll go to Valhalla, but they do this thing where when they are about to do essentially a kamikaze mission, they're about to give up their life for the sake of the mission, they shout out to the other war boys, "Witness me," and all the other war boys, they lock their attention on and watch as they commit suicide, and that is their pride and joy.
You're forgetting one detail. They get some like silver spray paint out and spray their mouth, which is kind of disgusting actually, to be honest. But they spray, and it's the idea is that they're shiny and chrome to go into the afterlife.
Yes. I love it. But I also love the implication. It's not said explicitly in the movie. I think it was only in like trivia, but I love the implication that this stuff they think is just like silver spray paint, but it is also like kind of a drug, kind of like a you have to be a little high to go driving into your death that willingly.
Yeah. So bit of action here, and the main fleet of vehicles is in pursuit, including a vehicle that has drummers on the back, and in the front, in front of a wall of amplifiers, is some crazy guy in a red outfit playing an electric guitar, which shoots fire out of the top of its neck.
I loved that. I absolutely, like, here's the thing. From a story perspective, it's the same as having, like, the Revolutionary War or whatever had, like, drums and a little fife player or whatever. Obviously, that's not a thing that happens anymore. But for someone like Joe, who is so big on the theatrics, so big on the mythology, this makes so much sense to me that he would have a full metal thing going on with him. And it was the first time that I said, I'm like, how is it that George Miller has something that silly, but I'm like, I'm into it. I believe this entirely. Continue.
Also, the main vehicle that Joe, I don't know if he's driving it when he first drive out, but he's driving for a lot of the rest of the movie, is like a monster truck, but the vehicle part at the top and top of the tires is kind of like a tilted like Cadillac, kinda. It's got like a
okay. I see what you're saying.
It's got a weird sort of like shape to it. It's interesting. It's an interesting vehicle. I'll say that.
So I think we got a little bit sidetracked with the names before we explained how Max is actually involved in all this.
Oh yeah, we're just getting to that. So he's giving blood to Nux, Nicholas Holt's character, and the call's going out for everyone to assemble and get into the vehicles to go chase after the tanker. And Nux's partner, seemingly, who's usually the guy in the back of the car, grabs the wheel, and Nux does not like this. It's like someone's just touched his like sacred sausage. He's like, no, I'm the driver. That's my wheel. It's like, you're not fit to go out. I just promoted myself. And he's like, you need blood. You're too weak to go and drive. And he's like, look, we'll just take the meat bag with us. We'll put him on the front of the car, and we'll just have him transfusing blood while we drive. So they literally set up Max on the... What do you even call this in a car? Like, because on a boat it would be like the masthead. It's a vertical, like, 3 pipes that are welded onto the grill. Yes.
So I guess you call it the grill. But
yeah, he's. But as, you know what I'm saying though, like, this is the sort of thing you'd see in like an old pirate ship back in the day.
Oh yeah, no, he is straight up a mermaid, just on the top of this, like arms back, ready to go.
They've got like a sort of Hannibal Lecter thing almost on his face, like a muzzle, right?
That was all over the marketing. Everyone saw those.
And yeah, like the chain that's like going from the back of his headgear, you can notice there's a tube inside it with like blood, like there's the transfusing pipe.
Tube. Yeah.
Tube's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Tube. It's like, but that's going back into Nicholas Hoult inside the car. And because he's so eager to prove himself to Joe, he ends up sort of like breaking ahead from the rest of the pack. So the car that Max is attached to ends up getting more directly involved with the tanker much, much earlier than the rest of the fleet does. This is like right after the Spiky Boys have all been kind of attacking the tanker. And this all builds up to this big giant sandstorms coming in, which basically Furiosa, I mean, she doesn't say it out loud, but the implication that everyone else seems to think is that, oh, she thinks she can, like, that she's good enough to get through that and we'll lose her in there, that it'll disguise her escape route and she'll get away. But we get some insane stuff in here where, like, Max is being hit with this sandstorm. He actually managed to get out of his, like, restraints, not the head thing, right? He's still connected to Nicholas Hoult with the chain, but he gets out of the thing at the front, and he ends up having to sort of like try and duck behind the car to not get pelted with just all of the sandstorm that's hitting them. Yeah, because they're all getting hit with this right now.
And that's the thing. You call it a sandstorm, but the scale of this thing, the way that they show, like the zoomed out shot as cars are just slowly making their way across, it's magnificent.
Not to mention, once we're actually inside it, because obviously, the shot of the big wall coming towards them is great. Once they get inside it, there's basically electric tornadoes happening inside the damn thing.
Oh my God.
One of the cars gets sucked in and gets broken apart, and it's like lightning inside it. It's glorious.
I love that shot because it would have been so easy to just do a thing where like they push the car and then they all just disappear into the like more intense vortex, but they don't. The car keeps on whipping around and exploding over and over again with people flying off each time. And I'm like, yes, thank you.
It's the beautiful thing is you can sort of say, well, this is because of all the nuclear fallout. It's affected the weather. Weather's more violent. This is a knock-on effect from the apocalypse. That's all this is.
Whatever it is, but it's fantastic. I like to assume this is just how Australia is. Like, that's why people don't go into the outback. That just happens every like Thursday.
Yeah, and Max gets like knocked off the car and like passes out. And honestly, the most unrealistic thing in the whole movie is probably that Max and Nicholas Hoult survived this. Like,
yeah, because there's a point where Nux, he gets right up on Furiosa and he's about to like he unloads all the gas cans and everything into the cabin of the car. Oh yeah, and
just to really sell the craziness of this, he basically starts just pulling nozzles out of things so that gas starts pouring into the car itself, and he starts like pouring gasoline all over himself. And this is actually almost darkly funny because Max is, again, at the back of the car during this bit. He's watching in from the back window and he realizes what this guy's about to do. And he's like, wait, you're not committing suicide by explosion while I'm, like, strapped to you. Yeah. So Max starts, like, punching the window, trying to get in to take the flare away. Because he's literally just going to drop a flare into himself and blow up the entire vehicle. So Max is desperately trying to get in. Oh, jeez. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, obviously the sandstorm passes. But, like, I checked the time on this, and it is exactly, and I'm not talking even off by like a second here, it is exactly half an hour in where everything goes black and we move on to the next thing. So that was essentially half an hour of nonstop, high-octane, just lose your mind action and visual effects. And as soon as it ended, I was like, how did anybody like survive this in the theater?
The funny thing is that this part is great, but it ends up being one of the weakest action scenes of the movie.
Right.
And the reason for that is partly because obviously in this sandstorm there's a lot more VFX because it's inherently just something they're not going to do for real. So a lot of the stuff later where it is more based in just great stunts and filming, right? And great cinematography is the word I'm looking for. Right? When it gets to that stuff, it's like even better than this, and the music ramps up at that point and gets even better. So in hindsight, this is actually like, you know what, they were right to put this first. This is actually the least impressive part. It's still fantastic. It was still exciting, but it's the least impressive of the bunch.
I just imagine during that fade to black, George Miller just walks in off the side of the camera and says, "Oh, you thought you saw enough?" And then we just continue on.
Yeah, and I loved it when we come back up from the black, like Furiosa is just out hitting like the vents on the tanker, the truck, because like there's just sand and everything. So she's just trying to get the sand out. They're just trying to like free up the vents and the engine. all very entertaining. And one of the things I'd forgotten about coming back to it is how good this fight between Max and Furiosa is, where Max is still chained to Nux, right? And not only that, the car door was also part of that chain. So he's carrying Nux over his shoulder and he's dragging the car door with him. And he comes up to Furiosa and the girls, who we see here, actually, slight tangent, they had these extreme, like, chastity belts.
Yeah.
But they had, like, it's like there was an opening where the crotch is, but there was, like, teeth. It was basically saying anyone who tries with one of my wives is getting their thing lopped off. That was basically the message of these things.
It's brutal as hell. And again, it just goes more to that idea that it has nothing to do with the plot moving forward. It has nothing to do with like Max and stuff. They could have easily just shown the brides getting out and not having these. But adding that tiny little touch adds so much depth and backstory to who Joe is as like a warlord that it really, really works.
Yeah, it sells the villain. Like, so it's absolutely like the movie would be lesser for not having this, you know, these crazy details that it puts in there. Yeah. But basically, this is very tense because Max doesn't trust them. They don't trust him. He is like surprised to see like these 5 women all in scantily clad like white outfits at first.
Yeah.
But he's not trusting them. He's still being very, very cautious. And he's got a shotgun, which he knows isn't going to work because he tried. The first thing he did with a shotgun when he found it is he tried to shoot off Nux's hand so that he could just like, you know, deal with the chain that way. He still have to deal with the chain eventually, but at least he would be free of the guy. And then it just kind of fizzles out and doesn't fire. So he's threatening with this shotgun, but it's not actually anything in it that he can use. And they're kind of held at gunpoint. They've got some water coming from the tank, so they're sort of like using this hose, and he gets some of the water. I really appreciated just how much he seemed to enjoy just turning that water hose, like, because he's still got the mask on, so he's just going kind of through the crack of the mask, and he's just sort of pumping water into his face. And
I'm sure that he is nothing but sand down his entire windpipe, and he's like, "Yep, just power wash that out."
Yeah, he seemed to love it. But we get this fight where he wants the bolt cutters, right? He wants one of the women to cut his chains to try and free him. And as this is happening, Furiosa tackles him, and we get this fight sequence where him and Furiosa are fighting. And what's so beautiful about this and what makes it feel so unique is that not only is he tethered to this other guy, and she's at a disadvantage as well because she's not got her mechanical arm on. She's only got her, you know, she's fighting with one arm. Is that the other girls start like pulling on the chain to try and help her, so he's like getting yanked back mid-fight, and then when Nux wakes up, he starts helping Max, thinking, "Oh, Max is trying to help us get the girls back, so yeah, I'll you know, for glory, brother, yeah." So he tries to help Max, and then Max just like punches him at the end of the scene. he's like, "Why? You can get anything you want."
This entire sequence is nothing but just a beautifully done, like, you know those YouTube videos showing off special effects where they show like a bunch of cars at an intersection all like weaving in between each other, and it's obvious that it's not real because they're just too tightly packed together? That's what this scene is in terms of fight scenes. Every tiny little thing that like is going on in an opposite side of a fight all of a sudden comes back and takes like the main fight. Like they pull on a chain at one point that leads to Furiosa being able to get an actual gun, which then leads to Max tackling her, which then leads to Nux getting pulled away, and it just all piles on itself until finally it gets to the end point.
It's very good. And even the final moment, which is, you know, Max pulled the gun from her and he ejected the clip, and then Nux like goes to grab the clip even though he's been tackled by the girls. The end of the fight scene is when Nux just holds out the clip and Max just slams the gun on it and then quickly like, you know, cocks it and then just fires 3 bullets around Furiosa's head and then points it right at her face. It's like action scenes are kind of like a good sentence, right? They need a good full stop. They need a good dramatic end where it feels like, okay, you've ended the sentence. And that's what this was. This quick fancy move with the gun and the gunshots was a way to say, okay, this fight is now over. But what a great like 2 minutes of fighting it was. Like,
oh yeah,
I completely forgot how good this was, and it stands out. And it's, you know, in a movie with all these insane car stunts and, you know, amazing things that it's doing with everything else, and even the previous thing that just happened with the sandstorm is super, you know, spectacular. This was just good one-on-one. Well, it's not even one-on-one necessarily, but it's just good human-on-human fighting that just has a couple of little gimmicks, which is the chain and like the sort of the help coming in from like other characters who aren't necessarily confident enough to get into the fight themselves, but are trying to help in the way they can with the tools around them. Just make it constantly entertaining. I was sitting watching it today, just going, that shouldn't be a special scene. This shouldn't be something that I'm going to be raving about later, but it's actually really impressive on its own right. Just this little fight scene between them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was part of, I felt like they put this into the movie specifically so that critics couldn't say like, whatever happened to the good old fist-to-fist fight scenes. It's like, here you go, and it's the best part of it so far.
Well, I think the other thing it does is that obviously we go in expecting Mad Max as a badass because it's called Mad Max, and if you've seen the previous movies, you at least understand who he's supposed to be based on. Mm-hmm. I think this scene is like, okay, Furiosa, thus far, it's been her story, because she's the one with this plan, she's the hero trying to save these other people, these other women who are being used as basically sex slaves, and, you know, she's the hero of the movie in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. But this scene is showing just how capable she is, and it's showing that her and Max are very equal-footed, and that it's very mano a mano, if you will. It's a horrible phrase to use in this context, but like this scene serves a big purpose in showing that they are very, very equal, and it sort of sets this idea up for the audience that we kind of want them to work together. We're not quite at that point yet. We understand why we're not at that point. It would feel like a betrayal if they were just suddenly buddy. You have to earn it a little bit. Mm-hmm. They have to be in a predicament where they have to work together. But for this moment, at this fight scene, it makes sense that they are not trusting each other, which just further sells this idea of the world is this screwed up, that in a weird way, the society that Joe has built is the one that feels more civil in a way, because everyone else who's not in this like control that he has is so mistrusting of each other because of how much they've been conditioned by everyone else in the world that they've encountered. It really sells this idea of this like broken society.
Yeah, that's the thing about like fascist societies like that. The famous line being like, say what you want about, I think it was Stalin. I could be wrong. No, it was Mussolini.
Is this the one about the trains running on time?
Right, exactly. Yeah, the trains will run on time. And there's that idea that like, yes, it sucks and the people are in an awful situation, but there is order and there is structure. And for a wasteland civilization like that, that's the sort of thing you need. It's the same sort of thing we saw in Thunderdome, where they had like a whole market and bazaar thing going on, but they essentially only had like two rules, and that is A, everything is in the Thunderdome, and B, one man enters, or two men enter, one man leaves. Yeah,
it's around here. I think it's when he's driving away in a minute, but Max gets more of those flashes. But interestingly, it's not just a daughter, it's also like an old man and someone else. Mm-hmm. And I kind of got the impression it was implying that these visions he was getting, obviously the child was the strongest one because it was meant to be his kid. Right. You know, even though it looks nothing like the kid from the original movie, but that's not the point. Yeah. It's more just the other like groups he's encountered that he's tried to help that maybe he's failed. You know, other people, other tragedy he's seen on the wasteland along the road, kind of thing.
Well, there's all those whispers in the back that are basically like, you promised, you said you would help, stuff like that, and it does seem very much guilt-ridden, like survivor's guilt, sort of PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely. So he tries to drive off in the truck. Away
he knocks out Nux as soon as he gets the chain clipped off. He just boom out and hops in the truck.
He's like, take this off. He's still got the mask on though. The mask is still on for a while. It's not until like the middle of an action scene where he finally gets it, because he's basically sawing at it with like a little file for like ages at the back to try and like get it off. But he tries to drive away, and it turns out that they just catch up to him because the tanker stops working after like half a mile. And it turns out that if you don't like do this particular sequence of buttons when you start it, it'll just sort of die out. And it's basically something that Furiosa's done to her truck so that no one else but her can use it.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've seen throughout the entire franchise. Even with Max's car, he sets up like bombs and stuff so that if anybody tries to tamper with it besides him, it'll just explode.
Yeah. This is not as bombastic as that, but it's arguably smarter though. It's like more of a trick. Like it's almost luring the people into a trap because they think they've gotten away, but then you sneak up behind them when they break down and can swipe. But fundamentally, it's like, hey, this truck only works if I'm the one driving it. So he lets her in, but doesn't want to let in the girls. He doesn't want to let in the wives. And they're like, no, they're coming too. Like they have to come too. Like they're not going. I'm not leaving them behind. And this is also, I think, maybe the first time we hear about the green. Like, one of them mentions, we have to go to the green, and we get more context for that as the movie goes on.
I do like when Furiosa tries to pressure him into letting the breeders on. He's like, well, we're just going to sit here and wait for Joe then. And Furiosa's like, that's a bad idea. Like, you're putting a lot of trust into an absolute psychopath to forgive you, especially because earlier on, I keep forgetting her name, Rosie, the splendid one. She goes to make her way back onto the truck, just saying, screw you, like, I'm popping on that truck regardless. That's in the middle of the fight scene with Max and all that. And he fires off a shot that grazes her leg. And Furiosa basically tells him, like, you shot his favorite. He ain't gonna be okay with you after that.
He does not like anyone damaging, quote unquote, his goods. And he's going to be upset about that. And this is such a good setup because it's used wonderfully in like 20 minutes. Like, it's used so well later on. So, he's reluctant about it, but, they all get in, and even Nux sneaks on the back. He kind of like climbs into, like, because there's like a secret underpassage to get to one of the tankers, which has like basically a room in it where they've been hiding, and he's able to sneak in via that. So he gets on and off a few times throughout.
Yeah, that's the one, like, I wouldn't call it a criticism, but just one thing I thought may have been structured better is that how many times he gets on and off this truck. I feel like it should have been a thing where he just gets on it the once and then either manages to stay on it or falls off. It's this weird thing where he gets on, he falls off, he reunites with Joe, he gets back on, and then he just kind of
stays,
changes from there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. I think the big moment with Joe before he gets back on is, one, really funny, but also like really necessary for his character arc. So yeah. From here, like, Furiosa's got a plan. They're going to this canyon, and there's other group are there. I'll call them the bikers because they seem to mostly be on bikes.
I think they might be from the gas town, maybe. One of them, I think the Bullet Farmer is definitely teamed up with Joe, so I think these are people from Gastown who are basically saying,
no, like, the Gastown's teamed up with Joe as well.
Oh, are they? All right, yeah, I don't know then.
The Canyon bikers even say at one point, hey, you said you'd have a few cars following you. There's 3 different fleets coming our way. So that's
the fleets from the...
Yeah, so that's, that's Joe and his people, it's the Gastown, and it's the Bullet Town.
All right, I guess it's just a third-party biker gang.
Well, we already had the Spiky Boys, so this is like the 5th party. I think we're at this point.
By the end of this, we have at least 9 parties at play.
But, so they're only expecting Furiosa, though. So she actually trusts Max with, like, her secret little thing to get the truck going, and says, if I yell, and notably here, she's asked for his name, and he's like, doesn't matter, right? And this really sells this idea that Max does not want to make human connections, because everyone he gets connected to completely, utterly dies and just makes him feel worse, and just that's why he's in the condition he's in. So he's like, I'll tell you my name, and this comes obviously dramatically up towards the end when he finally says what his name is. So she gets out and she realizes that they're being quite twitchy. It doesn't seem like they're going to let her through like they promised for the gasoline. So she yells out to Max to start the car, or to start the truck, and she jumps on as well. And this is obviously just as like the fleets are upcoming, but it's really just the bikers here that are attacking them, and this is where the great music kicks in. And the point of the great music here, and why it's such a sort of really exciting extended sequence here, one, because there's a lot of action, but 2, this is the first scene where Max and Furiosa are really working together, where she's basically let him having access to any of the weapons that are in the truck, and he's firing out of the truck as she's also like up in the top firing at things. At one point he has to go out and fix something in the back, and that's when he finally gets the mask off, because there's this moment when he's on top of the tanker and he takes off the mask finally. It's kind of like I can finally breathe kind of moment.
And of course that's where everything starts going bad.
But there's obviously all these natural things that slow down the main fleet of vehicles. Like here, the biker is at the canyon. They have like a set of explosives ready to sort of cause like a rock slide in the middle of the canyon, and that actually really blocks the path. And Joe can get over it with his monster truck quite quickly, but like the rest of the fleet have to sort of stay back and dig through for a while before they can come. So it really sets this up. And notably here, it's the bullet guy who has, like, again, it's an old school car. It's just like a Civic or something like that. But he's got like treads in the bottom of it instead. It's like he's modded like a car onto the top of a tank. It's really something. And that's notable because soon we're going to get into like muddy territory where they start getting stuck all the time. But Mr. Treads is just rolling on through because he's got treads. He's fine.
He's thought about the wasteland. He knows how to work through it. Honestly, I would be more concerned with like sand and stuff. I feel like I see so many things of cars just being stuck in like sand dunes and stuff. I'd fully have treads if I was out there.
Well, even that's something they use during this extended action scene. There's a bit where Furiosa hits a switch and like the grill, like the sort of pointy grill in the front of the truck, lowers down and sort of acts like a sort of almost shovel to the sand, and it creates like a sort of sand cloud that kind of covers the entire truck as it starts kicking back. It was a great visual.
It was also good because I think she only turned that on because at that point one of the bikers threw down like a firebomb that had the engine on fire, so she used it as like a fire blanket to like smother the fire out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We've not even got to what a lot of the action in this bit is. Obviously, there's the bikers like jumping over the sand dunes and coming for them. But there's also when the war boys get close to them, they start throwing like spears that are explosive at them. At one point, there's like a harpoon that goes through the window and into the steering wheel, and it pulls out the steering wheel. So then Furiosa has to get like a wrench and like sort of just, they have to like drive with a wrench that's just kind of holding like the, you know, the metal rod that would hold the steering wheel. They're just turning it with a wrench. Like, just there's all these little details of like, okay, we're going to present the characters a problem, and then we're going to see how they deal with it. And sometimes it's because it's just a simple thing like a wrench. Sometimes it's like, oh no, they've got this thing built in where they can do this with the sand. They've thought about this kind of thing. It sort of does a bit of world building at the same time. It's so many of those details, but on top of anything else though, it's just really well edited. Like the way the cars are flipping, some of the smaller cars with the war boys exploding around them, and just like, you know, being spun out and flipping and whatever else. It's all good stuff.
That's the one thing with both cinematography and editing, because they go hand in hand here, that I think most people know about, but it still blows my mind when I saw it actually happening, is that they made sure when they were shooting and editing this that all of the action was center frame. Whenever someone was talking, they were center frame. Whenever there was any sort of fast-paced cuts, everything you needed was smack dab in the center. So that way, when we change shots or whatever, you didn't have to worry about your eyes finding the right thing in frame to focus on. It was always right there. And it's so smart because then it doesn't make it feel like the action is haphazard. It doesn't make it feel like you're losing something because of all the fast cuts. It makes it work for it and picks up the speed and intensity of the scene while still giving you everything you need at a glance.
Yeah, and there's a lot of close calls where Max saves Furiosa, Furiosa saves Max from getting hit. Some of the wives start like wielding weapons in the back seat for them. Like it really,
I absolutely love Furiosa passed back like a sniper rifle or something to Splendid and was like reload, and she's like, I don't know how to do this, and I think it's Zoe Kravitz's character picks it up, just being like, I got it.
Yeah, like it's just there's so many moving parts. It's very entertaining. Obviously, Nicholas Hoult, they basically kick out. Like honestly, Furiosa is getting ready to kill him, right? Or Max is getting ready to kill him, and like no unnecessary death. Which it was really good because it was like, okay, they're not just out for themselves. They've actually got a moral code, right? The wives, and maybe it's because they've been sheltered, but they want to try and promote a better way of life to not just because especially since Joe's whole thing with the war boys is that, you know, your life is to be sacrificed, your life is to be given for the cause, and these characters who are, you know, are heroes are saying no unnecessary death. There's never a good excuse for that, so just throw him out, right? They try and debate with them quickly because he's like basically saying, oh no, I follow Joe's going to take me to Valhalla, and they're like, no, think about it for more than a second, like who actually is controlling all of us? Get out.
I actually really appreciated that debate because it was the first little setup on the fact that we are going to get a character arc to Nux. It would have been very easy to make him kind of just the secondary antagonist and just have him be loyal to Joe the whole way through, but having him hear this, having him interact with these women, and then he still has to go back and talk to Joe, and he's still loyal to Joe after all this, but you can tell there's just that tiny little seed planted that's going to change over the course of the movie.
Yeah. And it really sets this idea up that all the people working for Joe have been brainwashed into thinking this way, and that there is some level of innocence or people who can be redeemed even from within that side of things. And yeah, so from here, like, yeah, they get away, they go through the sort of the muddier lands, which, and there is a little bit of cool down in between. There's like these great, like, there's like people in stilts walking in like sort of the muddy area that just look really surreal but really cool.
That's the thing. They don't matter at all. There is no mention to them. They don't say, oh, they're part of this gang. They don't interact with our group, but it's just this world building to it where you say, yeah, if there is a muddy area to the world where, like, later on a character says that the soil is sour, which I think is the way that they would code phrase nuclear fallout has basically damaged this entire area. It would make sense that there's a group of people there who are able to live there, but like they can't spend an amount of time submerged in the soil in this wet mud. So therefore they have these stilts to stay above it. It's very well thought out. It doesn't matter to the movie at all, but it gives this extra depth to it that's just so much extra.
Yeah, and the order of all this is a bit wonky because like Nux is back on the tanker by this point. So the whole bit where he goes up to Joe's vehicle and he's like, hey, I can get into their tanker. I can stop them. I know how to get in. And Nux hands him a revolver and says, oh, if you do this for me, I will guide you to the gates of Valhalla myself. And he sprays the silver paint in his face to basically say, go and sacrifice yourself to get me what I want. And Nux jumps onto the tanker, and the chain from earlier, which was cut, that was connecting him and Mad Max, is still connected to him, and it basically gets caught in the metal grill at the top of the tanker, and he trips, and the gun that he just got 5 seconds ago just goes flying into the desert, and it just cuts to Joe, and he just goes, mediocre.
Just drives off.
And that's it. That's his chance. Like, just thrown.
It's a great, funny scene, but it is also at the same time devastating to Nux because he's like, I had my chance. I disappointed him. I made, like, my God essentially frowned upon me. What am I supposed to do now? And it allows him to, from that broken place, be one of the breeders comes up and basically comforts him and says, like, hey, that's not the life you're meant for, and turns him into this heroic character after that.
Yeah, he has to turn around. And yeah, our first day for night stuff is probably not too long after this, because there's definitely actually
there's
this whole little set piece where the truck stops because the engine's too hot. By this point, Nux has started to help a little bit.
Well, hold on, I do want to go even further back because there's a very important setup scene.
Go on.
During the canyon chase scene, Joe has them dead to rights. He's about to fire off.
Oh yeah, this is a good moment. Yeah, this is where he's got Furiosa in his sight and he's going to like shoot her head. And Splendid Rosie, one of the wives, opens the back door and just basically just hangs her whole body out to block it.
And we haven't mentioned she is full term pregnant. Like she looks like she's giving birth in like a month or two at this point, I think they say.
Yeah, if that, she starts getting contractions, I think, later on. But she just like throws herself in front of the path of the bullet, and Joe can't fire because he wouldn't want to kill her, or especially his baby. So this like completely saves her, which one does a lot for her character because it makes her feel very heroic by doing this on her own. But it plays with this mechanics that's already set up, is that Joe doesn't like his things, quote unquote, being damaged. So it's just it's the perfect thing where, okay, this was almost all over, and what you just did to make sure it didn't end didn't feel like a contrived movie thing where, oh, we got them out at the last second because of this, or we did this. No, you set this up and it makes complete sense and only just strengthens who these characters are, that he couldn't fire that shot because she made this choice. Yep.
But then shortly afterwards, I forget exactly what the reasoning that got us in the situation, but Splendid ends up outside the truck. She's dangling on the side. She manages to almost make her way back in, but then because of just how the choreography works, they end up having her slip down off the edge, and she goes underneath the wheels of Joe's truck. And she is not okay.
This is the thing, like, this action set piece in the middle from like going through the canyon to this point where she dies, it's after this where the truck finally stops for a while, is so long and so full of these moments and details. Like, it's so dense. Now, I think the reason why she was hanging out is because I think Max gets caught in something and he's dangling upside down. So I think her and one of the others are trying to hold him up and like keep him safe. So, and that's the thing. By this point, like, they're really fighting to work together to try and save each other, including Max. So it feels like a big moment. Or was it, maybe it was Furiosa who was hanging off? But someone was hanging off and she was trying to help them up. That was what was going on, and she ends up falling off when they go past this sort of rock that's sticking out. And Joe's very upset. They're upset. They want to go back and try and get her, and Max is like, she went under the wheels. I saw it. Like, that's it. Yeah, she's done.
All the other breeders are still screaming, go back, but even Furiosa realizes, like, no, like, it's more important that we get away. She died. That sucks, but like, we have to keep moving. Yeah.
So, and like I said, that moment where she saved Furiosa was enough that like, obviously you care in a broad sense about this group of characters. They're kind of the MacGuffin seems a bit harsh, but like,
they're the innocents. They're the ones that you don't want to see anything bad happen to.
Well, yeah, but there's always this thing in storytelling where you can't just give me a group of people and say, oh, they'll be hurt if X thing doesn't happen. You have to make me care about them. So that's why it's smart that they had that moment where she saves Furiosa before, because now it makes her more sympathetic to the audience, so that her death is the one that matters when it does happen. It's why she's the one who got that moment, because she's the one that was going to die like 5 minutes later. And it makes it have a bit more meaning, a bit more weight, so that when the rest of the characters feel sad, particularly the other wives, you understand that you feel sad too, because she didn't deserve that. She actually was really doing a lot to help them and like be heroic and have this dream of getting to the green and getting out of this horrible life that they've been in. So, and at this point, they are a little doubtful. I think Kravitz says, "Oh, we're still going to the green," and then one of the others is like, "Oh yeah, sure." Like they're starting to have their doubts. They're starting to question if this thing's even real.
I think it's somewhere around here, Cheeto just wholesale breaks away from the group and like tries running back to Joe, saying like, "Look, we had it good there. We're dying out here. We should just go back. He'll forgive us. He'll let us back in."
Yeah, she's basically the woman going back to her abusive husband almost. Like, that's like, this is getting scary. At least that was the evil we knew, and they have to kind of talk her out of it. It's actually around here, or soon after they're in the wetlands, because again, we've kind of muddied the order up at this part a little bit.
That's whatever.
But they're in the wetlands and they're ready to go. They've cooled down the engine, and Max says, "All right, go up about half a click," and he starts walking back towards like the one truck that's following them. And Furious is like, "Yeah, but what if you're not back by the time we're ready to go?" He's like, "Well, just go then." And then when he does come back, like, they're getting ready with the guns. They're like, "Oh, is someone bad coming?" And it's Max walking back towards them, carrying like a sack full of ammo, because by this point they're out of ammo. And he's also brought a boot and a steering wheel. The boot is for Nux. We didn't mention this earlier, but Max didn't have one of his shoes, so he stole one of Nux's after the whole storm thing happened. So this was actually almost a sweet little detail that he got a boot for Nux, because he knew Nux needed a boot. It was just kind of nice. So I was like, oh, that was kind of nice of him.
I also, just funny line-wise, back when Nux was joining up with Joe again to go out and get them, his Lancer, the guy who was working with him, was the one who stole Max's boot originally. And so Nux holds up like one of the fabrics from the breeders, showing that he was in contact with them. And Joe's like, "Get on board. You're part of my personal convoy." And then the Lancer guy's just like, "I got his boot. I should be a part of it. Let me on the convoy."
Yeah, there was a moment before this as well where it's the bullet guy and he's like, his car with the treads, and it's nighttime and he's got the light and he's coming towards them. He's just a nut job firing his machine guns into the distance, hoping he's going to hit them. And Max is trying to use the sniper rifle to shoot out the light, and he misses until there's only one bullet left, and he just sort of like sighs and hands it to Furiosa, so she uses his shoulder to aim, and she's like, "Don't breathe." But all I could think was, isn't your hearing just going to be messed up? Like, she has that gun next to your head when she fires it.
Well, that's the thing that they do. As soon as he takes the shots, they do, in the audio effects, that ringing noise and keep everything muffled for about like 5-10 seconds before it finally starts coming back. And I'm like, all right, good for you. You don't just claim that bullets don't make sounds.
It cuts back to the Guntown guy in the tread car, and he's like, hold the flare close to my face, and like, we are, boss. Like, basically he's blind because the light smashing right in front of his face has burned out his eyes.
Like glass and stuff probably went back into it, blinded him out. So then he is the best bit after that, where he puts on a blindfold, he has dual machine guns, and he's like, I am the scales of justice, and starts firing like crazy.
Yeah.
I love how insane they get.
Yeah, so all the good characters are like try to like hold up a door to like shield them from the bullets and duck back into the truck, and
because at this point the rig, I think we mentioned, it's completely stuck in the mud. Like, they have no way to be able to get the rig moving at this point, save for a lone tree that they try tying a winch to like pull them out of the mud.
That's what Nux is doing when all this gun stuff's happening, is he's trying to like get it unstuck out of the mud. They've put like some metal like in front of the wheels to try and like get it out of the mud and whatnot. Little detail here, and this kind of goes back to the kids in Mad Max 3, is Nux says, hey, there's high ground beyond that thing, and then one of the wives looks at it and goes, I think he means the tree. He's like, yeah, tree. This tree thing.
Yeah. I again, it's just one of those things where these are people, because we've said this has been a wasteland for at least like 20 years now. It's one of those things where if they didn't have a history of it, if they never saw a tree before, they wouldn't know what it looks like. They would just know that, like, oh yeah, the world used to be green, but we don't actually know what that is or what that means.
Yeah, it's just continuing those ideas that were in the previous movies, and you get the younger characters haven't experienced this prior world, so they don't know a lot of these things. Interesting, the wives who are also about the same age as him do know what it is, but I wonder if that's because they're privy to a lot more like material. They get to read things, they get to see photographs, like they're given stuff in their cave.
I don't think there's anything in the movie to say that they actually know what the green is. I think that they are told stories about it.
I'm not saying they know that, but they know what a tree is. Like, he doesn't.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. They do bring up tree. Yeah.
They know more than he does. How much they know is up for debate, but they certainly knew that. So I'm just wondering if, like, part of being one of Joe's wives is that, they've got, like, a library of books that they look at that's got pictures or whatever the case may be. Who knows? Maybe they've got a generator, they're watching some old movies. Who knows? I don't know.
I doubt it's quite that far, but probably. Most likely it is something of just, like, old books or something.
Yeah. And somewhere in between these scenes again, like, the movies look very well structured, but it's actually hard to like remember because it is just one big chase scene with like sort of like downtime moments in between the bigger moments.
That's the thing. Each of the action bits has a very clear cause and effect. Like, this causes this to happen, this causes, but the actual plot details can kind of just pepper in wherever they need to be.
But, you know, Max and Furiosa do have a little bit of a talk where she's saying she's sort of fighting for redemption, tries to open up a little bit. This is probably not too long before they get to the characters from the Green, which is where she's from, because he says, hey, how do you even know this place is real? And she's like, I was born there. And my ears perked up because I'm like, well, interestingly enough, we're getting a prequel with Furiosa, so I wonder if we're going to see this Green when it was thriving in this new movie.
I paid special attention to every word she said, because I'm like, I bet all of that is being used as just the treatment for the script of what we're going to see.
Yeah. Oh, it's not all in the scene with Max. Some of it's a little bit later when they find the other women. But she talks about how she was stolen when she was younger. Not a child, because obviously she's Anya Taylor-Joy, seemingly. Unless that happens before she's Anya Taylor-Joy. Maybe like she's like a child at the start of this prequel movie.
I did notice in the Furiosa cast list they do have young Furiosa. Yeah. So
I thought Anya Taylor-Joy was already young Furiosa.
I was going to say, at this point we've got young, middle, old Furiosa. So
yeah, relatively speaking, there is no world in which I'm saying Charlize Theron is old.
That's the thing. I agree wholesale, but like in my mind, I don't know why, I just feel like Charlize Theron has been working since like the mid 70s to 80s. I'm wrong.
Oh, you're wrong about
that. I just, in my mind, that's the sort of like alternate history I've got going on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she's I think in her late 40s by now, but like you know, I'm not going to, especially in this movie, I'm not going to call her old.
Oh no.
But yeah, one of the most gifable moments of the whole movie is Max going, "That's bait," and it's when there's a naked woman in like a cage up in like this like sort of like just tower yelling for help, and he's like, "That's bait." And Furiosa gets out and just announces who she is and that she came from this clan, and like eventually like these other bikers come out, and they're all women. So I was like, oh, is this like a Themyscira style thing? We got
pretty much, yeah.
You know, a clan of Amazons. And they're like, excited to see her. They recognize the name. One of them says, "Oh, her eyes look familiar. That must be so and so's daughter." So this is some of the stuff that presumably we're going to get some bits and pieces of in Furiosa. But she mentions that her mother died on the third day and she's been gone for 7,000 days. Someone can do the math, but
I mean, 365 days being a year and 700 being about twice that. That's where I came up with the 20 years number. So it's been right. At least 20 years.
Oh, 20 years since she left her home, not 20 years since the apocalypse.
But like, you have to assume her being taken must have happened post like apocalypse happening.
Oh, no doubt. I think it's way into the apocalypse. I don't think it's even close to the apocalypse. I think it's... I think the apocalypse... Well, Max isn't that old, but...
Right, that's the thing. It has to be... Go ahead.
I feel like the apocalypse was like 30 years ago. I could be wrong, but...
It must have been within the lifetimes of this older women that we see, because the older women remember the time before that. They are aware of the world as it existed before the gas wars and the water wars, as we saw listed off in the prologue.
I think with Max, he's kind of flexible, and again, like this idea that we're just following one continuity with him is not really. He's more just like a folklore kind of legend where you can tell any version of the story with Max in it in the Wasteland. So I don't think it matters that much to try and line it up with his age per se. Like,
no, you know, especially once you get a recast. Once it's a recast, then it's just wholesale whatever it wants to be at that point.
Yeah. But they break some terrible news to her that, oh, you must have passed what used to be the green if you're here, because it all went bad. The soil went bad, and we get this big shot of Furiosa just stumbling into the desert and like going onto her knees and screaming as the sand sort of swarms around her. Very pretty shot, very good stuff. And their plan is to basically just, you know, with all these other women they found, because there's not that many of them. It's like maybe 8 other characters that they've introduced here. They're just going to take their bikes and just go into the salt lands and keep going till they hopefully find something. And Max is like, nah. Like, Furiosa offers, hey, you're welcome to come with us. And he's like, nah, I'll make my own way. And it actually cuts to a very similar shot. It's basically the same shot at the start of the movie where you're standing with his back to the camera and you're just watching. And even like his bike that they've given him and like the truck that they've been using are like sort of next to him the same way the car was at the start. And he's looking out and he has more of these flashes of the people that he's failed. And it's almost like the memory of his daughter here. Like, not only does it like help him make a choice here, later on actually, it almost like saves his life, where, you know, he always does this thing with his hand where it goes up to his head whenever like he has this like sort of flash of her, and later on it saves his life because it blocks an arrow. So
I know the way that you're like it happens in the movie, but the way you're describing it, you make it sound like he's about to faint, just like, oh my lord, good heavens.
That's the way his hand is though, right? It was out of the way.
Yeah, it's there, but like it shoots up because the daughter outstretches her hand to his face like really fast, as if she's like throwing something.
Yeah, it's like he's shielding himself. He's like,
yeah, exactly. And I mean, there are several during these little flashes like freeze frame bonuses, like a single frame, and I couldn't help myself. I did pause on this one, and during the freeze frame, it is a character in a black mask with like a black hockey mask looking thing. That is the exact character that this comes in handy for later. So it does have some level of like future sight to it, in the very least. Okay.
Maybe he's not mad then. Maybe he's just he's clairvoyant, Max.
It doesn't quite go as marketable.
So he rides out and catches them, gets in front of them and blocks them, and says, "Okay, here's your plan. Go back to the Citadel. Go back and like." You say you want to find green, there's green there, there's water there, and it's undefended because they're all out hunting for you. We go back through the canyon, we use this tanker to like just blow it up and like just completely like crush them all and get back, because you're looking for some promised land, you're looking for some hope, but what's the point in hope if you can't fix what's already broken? So the idea is not to go out and the idea that there's some Eden out there that is perfect already that you'll just stumble into. No, let's fix what's already here. Let's fix something that's tangible, that we know is there, that we can go back and heal. And I think he's kind of speaking about himself in a way here, like this idea that you know he's been kind of lost and broken, and now it's like, hey, I can help you, and this is how I can help you. So
I also like that it's kind of calling out the past two movies where both of those had this idea of a group of people who hear about this great place just over there, just out of reach, and they are able to make it there. And both the movies ended with the idea that it was there. Like, there was something out there, and they managed to make it, and Max is the legend that they tell moving on. But I like that this movie kind of takes it the other way of saying, like, look, you got to have some responsibility for the world we already have. Not having responsibility for the world we already have is what led to this. It's what led to the wasteland to begin with. We have to take care of what is there already.
Do you think this is kind of like in the the 30 years between the movies and making the movies? Do you think that maybe just being more aware of things like climate change and having to actually try and take care of the planet has maybe influenced this difference in story that he's telling here with Max as opposed to the previous movies?
I mean, entirely possible. I do think they were, with at least the last movie, they were somewhat aware of the climate change idea. But I think this is the first movie that's been made since we realized just how dire it really is.
Oh yeah, like, I mean, climate change isn't new. You can go back to movies in the 70s and they're talking about it. But, I think, we are more aware. Information's spread more easily. It's more readily available. It's more of a hot topic.
Changing the moral from essentially being like, let's just leave the Earth and go colonize a new planet to maybe we should take care of the Earth we already have. That's a much better message here.
Yeah. So, yeah, they agree. They all kind of like basically voice that they're into the plan, and Furiosa's the final one to sort of grab Max's hand to be like, yeah, we're doing it.
I do like the idea that they don't just blanketly say like, oh, we'll get there and then we'll just take over. They cover that. They specifically say like, okay, but like, we're going to come back and Joe's not going to be there. How do we plan on saying that we're like going to rule things now, going to be able to take over the area? And they point out saying like, well, first off, we will kill Joe. That's definitely going to happen. But also, we've got Nux here. He's a war boy. He's if he's loyal to Joe, as far as they know, he can vouch for Furiosa being like the rightful leader. And then everything else will fall out from there.
And obviously the big thing, and we see this at the end, is that they give the people what they want. Like, they let the water flow and seemingly will not turn it off. Or maybe they will at times of the day. But like the implication being they're not going to be stingy with it the way Joe was.
Yes. They're going to give people as they need it, not just as one person deems it so.
Yeah. So, obviously at this point in the movie, there's been a little bit of downtime since the last very, very long action series of set pieces. And it's like, okay, you've just given us the goal. You've set up what this final fight's going to be. And it's them driving back. Joe and the cronies notice, hey, they're driving back. Where are they going? Oh, they're going back to the Citadel because it's undefended. And we get this scene. And I think one of the interesting things about how they do, at least the first chunk of this big final part of the chase, is that there's not a lot of music, or what is there is very muted, and it almost feels like a horror movie, the way that some of the war boys are like sneaking up onto the tanker, or the ones that are on the big flexible poles that are kind of like swinging in. Like, one of them literally swings in, grabs Zoe Kravitz, and just pulls her out. Like it's like an alien abducting someone, where they just swing down and pull her up, and she screams, and they're all freaking out. And they're getting hurt, they're dying. Some of these new like allies they've picked up along the way are getting killed.
The older women are just getting like they're able to defend themselves. They do a good job of shooting off people coming in, but they are still like elderly women pretty much. It's they get killed off pretty much one by one as this continues on. Yeah, they're dying for the hope of the youth to pull things off and change the world. Can I just real quick, one thing, it was earlier on in the movie, but it was also here, is that they treat the guitar playing dude on the amps, who still is around. Like, he wasn't just in that one scene. He's been around. I love that they treat it as in-scene sound. So, like, if a camera is, like, doing a full crane shot over top of them as they're driving through the desert, you hear the guitar, like, pick up, and then it fades back out as we move past them. It isn't just, like, the music of the scene. It is coming from the truck.
I mean, right before they notice, Max and Co are driving back to the Citadel. The guitarist is basically sleeping next to the guitar, and then when everyone's like, "Hey, we need to go again," he's okay, time to play. It's like, and it even comes out to play because Max ends up on that vehicle later on and actually hits people with a guitar.
So awesome. Like, again, it's one of those things where if it's written on paper, and I think I'm in the actor's mindset with that, of the actors read the script and they say, okay, Tom Hardy, you're going to land on this truck. You are going to take this guitar and you're just going to start like beating him with it. And they're just going to be like, okay, that sounds stupid as hell, George. Like, how is this going to fit in with this high octane third act scene? But then you see it and it works perfectly. It is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, this is after Max himself gets on one of the big poles that are like swinging like backwards and forwards, and because he gets picked up by one of the war boys, and then he ends up on the pole, and then he's swinging around, and he ends up on the guitarist's vehicle. The whole time, Joe and his men are like coming around the tanker. There's more climbing on. More of them are getting hurt. I mean, Furiosa gets stabbed at one point, and again, that was one of those moments that feel like a horror movie to me. Is that the war boy who does it just kind of sneaks in from the side and just quietly comes up and stabs her. And they quickly deal with them, but she's still stabbed. Like, she's still like in pain and like, you know, struggling for the rest of the scene now.
Losing blood quickly, yeah.
And it's the full circle payoff to that is that Max ends up giving her a transfusion to save her afterwards, like by choice. Like, you know, he's not forced of him. He chooses to do it to save someone that he now respects. So, you know, we've come full circle in that regards. But yeah, and Nux is like climbing around fixing things on the tanker, and like they notice him. The bad guys notice him doing it. Like, oh, you traitor! You've betrayed Joe. How dare you, Nux?
Oh, can we talk about the gasoline spitting? Just for a minute
yes. So, yeah, at the start of this action scene, one of the main bad guys' vehicles are coming up alongside them, and Furiosa says out loud, they're trying to get in front of us so they can drop spikes and ruin our tires. So we have to try and like keep speed up against them. And they notice that over in that car, there's a war boy squirting in gasoline into like the.
I think that's Max's car. I think that's the.
Oh, it is Max's car, but I mean, in context of the scene, it's their car. They're driving it.
Right.
They're squirting gasoline or extra fuel of some kind into the vents on the big V8 engine, right? And that apparently like gives it a jolt, and there's like more fire coming out of the vents, and it makes it go a bit faster. It's like an extra bit of boost. So Nux is like, hey, I'll do that as well. And Furious is like, hey, don't ruin the engine. He's like, no, just a little bit. So he basically does this without a squirt bottle by like sucking up some of the gas out of the tank and just spitting it into the V8, and he does it a few times, and he starts to like cough violently, like, oh, this is too much. He swallowed some gasoline, he's violently sick. So Max is like, okay, but we need to keep doing this. So Max climbs out and he's like, hey, give me that tube, and he starts spitting gas into the
and then the person on the other car who has a tube is like, well, I don't want to be outdone, so he starts just spitting into the engine for no reason.
He's got a squirty bottle. He doesn't need to put it in his mouth.
But he just wants to be badass. He wants to match Max's energy. So both of them are just spitting into the engines, and we see them trying to race one ahead of each other until eventually, I think Max's car does get ahead. Max's car ends up accidentally swerving off to the side because the driver gets shot. So it's also out.
Yeah, no, this scene is full of things, and like I say, the tone being so different for the first half, where it was almost creepy the way they kept trying to get onto the vehicles. The canyon bikers get involved as well at one point because they like notice all the vehicles coming. Nux ultimately has a big sacrifice moment where everyone is transferred to Joe's vehicle, and we should probably mention Joe's death here.
Yeah, for sure.
Joe's mask gets caught and then ripped off, and it looks quite violent, quite painful.
Yeah, Joe has Zoe Kravitz in the passenger seat holding her hostage.
Yeah, this is after she gets abducted like an alien, abducting someone out of the top of the vehicle. And
then through a huge thing of trying to push back Mr. Erectus, we have Furiosa coming up the side of the vehicle. Her prosthetic arm is like kind of falling off at this point.
Oh, that's right. This is the perfect part of this, is that the thing that hooks his mask is her prosthetic arm. It's her hook that comes out and hooks him, and then yanks off the thing. So she's actually not got her arm for the rest of the movie at this point. She sort of sacrifices it in that moment.
I love the line. It's not even like a good one-liner. I just love the delivery of it. She hooks on the mask, which obviously turns his head towards her just by default. And she says, remember me. And just with such anger and like hatred in her voice. And then freaking Joe just roars. He just gives an animal, like, monstrous roar as she rips off the mask, and you just see blood and vitriol flying out. It's so brutal, and yet it felt like the perfect thing. Like nothing else could have killed Joe, you know? It wouldn't feel right if he died in a car crash or got shot by a gun. Like it had to be something this personally brutal to make it worth it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've set him up so well. So many of the details they've planted about who Joe is and how he treats people. Like, he deserved the worst possible death, and this looked painful as shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, very good.
But yeah, so Nux
basically,
the truck.
If you take the mask off, it would be immensely painful for you.
That's Tom Hardy came on set and he's like, now don't try to take this off, Joe. You're not going to like it.
Yeah, but they're basically all transferred to Joe's monster truck. That's what they're driving now. Because again, the plan was always to maybe not like leave the truck part of the tanker behind, but the tanker itself was going to be used to, you know, blow up the canyon.
Yeah, they were going to blow up the fuel part that's in the very back. So,
but basically, Nux is left driving. He says he'll be following them right over, but I think it's Erectus jumps on the hood or whatever, and he can't. So he basically makes the choice to just sort of, you know, flip the truck into the canyon so that everything will blow up. You know, Erectus gets his big death as well here.
I love his sad little, because he's bonded with one of the breeders at this point. I can't remember which one it is, but
it's what's his name, Riley Coe's character. Who, by the way, Riley Coe at times I was like, you could be the sister of Jenna Malone. I was getting a lot of Jenna Malone vibes from her.
I could see
here.
that. Yeah, absolutely. But he's bonded with her, and he just points at her, and then whereas everyone else throughout the movie always screams, "Witness me," he just very quietly whispers it. He's like, "Witness me," as he fork knifes it and crashes the whole canyon down.
Yeah, but he says it while he's looking at her, though, right? He says it's sort of more affectionate, like, I'm dying to save you, and that means more than dying for Joe ever, you know.
Yep.
Yeah. And again,
he's saying
choosing
witness
to do
me
this
more as a, like, remember me sort of thing. Like, I hope you survive.
But again, it comes back to the idea that Max chooses to give his blood willingly. He's choosing to die for someone, not because they demanded it of him, not because they said, you have to do this for me. He's doing it because he wants to do it for her. So, you know, again, it kind of mirrors Max's kind of arc in a way. So, no, good stuff.
I also really like during the scene, because obviously you're saying he transfuses the blood with Furiosa. She also, because of where she got stabbed, basically her lungs collapsed. And I like that Max has enough wherewithal and enough knowledge of this that he knows like what to do in that situation, that he has to get the air out of her chest cavity in order to let the lung like refill. But again, she's lost too much blood. She's just essentially bleeding out at that point. But I just like that tiny little touch that Max is like, all right, everyone stand back. And he makes another incision that ends up saving her for just like a few minutes more.
Yeah, and then transfuses blood, which, you know, ultimately saves her. And they get back, and there's still, you know, the little guy and some of the henchmen are still kind of up at the controls. The idea being that at the Citadel, none of the poor people can go up to where all the stuff is. They just, like, there's this elevator that takes the truck up. And they get on the truck, but they stop moving it after a little bit because they're like, wait a minute, identify yourselves. And that's when Max and Furiosa get out and show that Joe's dead, and they kick him off into the crowd. And they're like,
and immediately the crowd is just swarming the body.
They're like, yeah, eat him. Eat the rich.
It did seem like it was probably like a cannibalistic thing, but I also like the fact that they were just, at that point, they may have still been a little bit of like dedicated to Joe, and they're just like, oh, the immortal's body, and they all just wanted like a souvenir of it.
Yeah, what's really fun is that like they don't know if they want to let them up, and it's actually the chanting of the crowd, and one of the war boys, you know, flips the switch.
The war pups, the kids pups, that are too small to become actual war boys.
The ones that have not been maybe completely as brainwashed yet decide to keep the elevator moving.
They look down at Mad Max standing in his leather jacket, kicking a Morton Joe off the hood of his car and saying, okay, he's cool enough, guys. Bring him in.
And Max doesn't even go up in the elevator, though. He jumps off. The final shots of the movie are Max sort of like going off into the crowd, and just he looks back and gives a little nod to Furiosa, but she returns. But that's the ending. Again, this idea that he's the wandering hero that comes in and helps and then moves on, and maybe he'll help someone else somewhere else. So really good stuff. Also nice touch that when the water gets turned on, because I misremembered this, I just assumed that they got up and turned the water on. It's actually the milkers that are up there who sort of see this is happening, and they're the ones that flip the water on. The idea being, oh yeah, now that Joe is not in charge anymore, like they're up there, they can just go and flip the switch. No one's going to stop them. It's like this sort of like it's symbolic because some of the poor people have climbed onto the elevator, so they're going up as well with the truck in Furiosa and that. But it's just this idea that, okay, now the people are in control of this place, and obviously someone needs to be in charge to run all the agriculture and makes everything run, but not like Joe was, not in this keeping control of people way. So
it's going to be much more of like a co-op situation rather than a dictatorship. Like everyone's going to have their role to play. Everyone's going to be able to do something.
It'll be a commune.
Yeah, pretty much.
They'll be communists.
Better than what they had, wholesale.
I'm borrowing that joke from The Last of Us. The Last of Us TV show, there's a moment where they go to this really functioning town.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And, they're like, hey, and someone says, wait, so you're communist, basically? And the guy from Texas is like, no, of course not. And then his wife is like, yeah, we are. This is a commune. Yeah. We're communists. Just, this is what it is. And he just has this moment where he's like, huh, is all the propaganda telling me that's an evil thing my whole life? Been shit? What is this? Huh.
I might need to reevaluate a few things, starting with my Texas license plate.
But yeah, so no, it's a solid ending. It's this Max, being again this wandering hero. It's very interesting that the choice for the next movie is Furiosa. I mean, one, just because inherently I'm a little distrustful of prequels because they 99 times out of 100 suck ass. That said,
the Star Wars trilogy being the one exception, obviously. But
no, Better Call Saul's the one exception. But I mean, obviously, the things they reference in her backstory are relatively vague in this. I have to assume that George Miller's just got some cool ideas that he wants to do, and that's why he's doing this, rather than... Because it would be so easy to just do another Mad Max. Even if Tom Hardy doesn't come back, you've established you can recast now. So just, Max wanders into a new situation, but clearly he liked some of the backstory that he's thought of for Furiosa, and that's why we're doing that next instead. So... This was clearly a creative choice. I'm just curious if I'm going to be happy with that choice by the time we see it. But
yeah, I mean, I think if I had to guess what the plot was going to be, I think that we're going to get her initial, abduction and stuff like that as kind of an opening. But I think most of the movie's going to be her development under Joe and showing that she was always, resistant to him while still building up her... notoriety.
I mean, the movie, she does say she's looking for redemption, so I do wonder if she does do something that she does regret, in this movie. There's going to be, a negative choice she makes. The Furiosa, the movie from the trailer, seems to have another villain, so I wonder if she ends up helping Joe because it helps take out Chris Hemsworth's character or something, and then she has to live with the fact that she's helped this guy come to power. And that's maybe why she wants redemption in this one. I'm just theorizing based on, glimpses of things in the trailer. I don't know. That's
fair. I mean, I've avoided the trailer, so I'm not sure. But I just don't see an entire movie based off of her first abduction happening. I don't think that's enough.
I think that happens when she's a kid, so I don't think that's going to be most of the movie. I think, I mean, I think what we're going to see for sure, we're going to see her lose her arm. That's just...
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
No chance we don't see that in this movie.
That's a third act thing. I can already see that being during the big scene, she has to make a decision that's going to cost her arm.
I could see it equally being end Act 1 or during Act 2, and it's like when she gears up and puts the war paint on for the first time in the metal arm, that's getting into Act 3 kind of thing. I could see that being the case. But I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I'm hopeful because George Miller's a great director. I expect the action scenes are going to be fantastic. I just conceptually, it does give me a little bit of pause that we're doing a prequel for a character instead of just doing another new story. But it's not it's not like doing Star Wars prequels where it's there's a ton of lore that's mentioned in the original trilogy that we're going to.
We're not gonna have the scene where Joe says by the way, have you heard about this Max guy down in the wasteland?
Oh god, there cannot be a single reference to Max in any shape or form. It will be terrible if there is. That. There should be nothing referencing Max.
Yep, I'll agree.
Yeah. And if they somehow do a reference that doesn't feel bad, I will be in awe that they've pulled it off. But I don't.
a limping and beaten up Tina Turner comes in saying, "You won't believe the day I had."
I mean, I could maybe see something like I don't know, maybe like one of the beat up old cop cars or something from the first movies in like the background or something like that'd be fine, you know?
Yeah.
But
I mean,
that's
just
it.
references to the other movies are not inherently bad because it all takes place in the same world, as long as it's vague enough. As long as
Yeah.
it is like, just, oh yeah, remember Thunderdome happened. You don't have to specifically say the people who were in Thunderdome were there.
Yeah. Which actually we kind of glossed over. You know, it's when he's given her the transfusion and hoping she'll live that he finally says, "My name is Max." And it's that idea that that's where, like, he's returned to caring about humanity. And I mean, he kind of has. Obviously, he's been very reluctant as a hero throughout the movie, but more and more he's been getting involved. And I think this moment where he's like, no, I do actually want you to know my name. I want us to be human companions. I'm Max. Like, you know, that's a big deal that he finally says his name to her.
Oh yeah. I mean, obviously that's how the movie plays it off. I did, as it was starting, where he was saying his name, just had the little intrusive thought of like, you're gonna die anyway, so it's not gonna matter. My name's Max. Bye.
No, it came from a place of hope. It's a sweet moment. So, yeah, honestly, Mad Max Fury Road, I think, is this really weird case where this creator came back to the thing that he did 3 movies of a long time ago and said, okay, what can I do with this now? How can I up what I've done before? And frankly, came in and made an even better movie than he ever did before. Like, I think this is the best of the 4, which is not a knock on the others. Like, you know, Road Warrior especially is kind of the classic. It's very, very good. We praised it quite highly. I think this, like I said, that first few minutes when it was being really quick with the intro, I was like, oh, I don't think I will like this more in Road Warrior this time. But then when it just gets into the actual main gist of the movie and those action scenes start happening, and it's such an adrenaline-fueled movie. It really is. So many movies say that. They'll put it on the poster. Some critics said it's an adrenaline-filled movie. This actually is. This is one of the few movies in history of cinema that I would actually say that about.
Yeah, this is every other movie. You're like, well, I guess that's kind of subjective. That's just how that one person feels about it. This is the only time where like they could go to a court of law and the law would come down saying like, nope, this is an adrenaline-filled movie.
It's
full stop.
I think honestly, when it comes to science fiction, I feel like the last decade or so, last decade and a half, get thereabouts, sci-fi really came back in a big way, and I think we have been truly lucky because this is a year after Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is one of the best science fiction films of the last 20 years. Mad Max Fury Road is one of the best science fiction films of the last 20 years. It's a very different science. This is an action science fiction film. It's a post-apocalyptic. I mean, technically they're both post-apocalyptic. Actually, that's actually the one thing they both share. But this, that's a thoughtful breakdown of society. This is an adrenaline action movie of a science fiction movie, and they're both like some of the best examples of their kind. And I think there's other great sci-fi movies from this past decade and a half that just make it feel special. It felt like for a while there, almost every year had one special, like, oh, this is on the new top 50 sci-fi movie list of all time. Like, it keeps adding new stuff to it. And, I think, another movie from around this time, which has not been done on Ace yet, but I think with putting that conversations Under the Skin, that was around this time. That was 2014. And I'm sure there's more that I'm not coming to mind right now, but really, great stuff.
Solo, a Star Wars story.
Go F yourself. I've not even seen that movie, but I'm sure I'm going to disagree with that statement.
Yeah, I just go by reputation.
Yeah, really spectacular. So,
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, are we just getting into ratings?
It's rating time. I was summing up. All that was make me try to sum up things. So
yeah,
go on.
I mean, it's above a 9. It's either at a 9 or above a 9. So my question is, where do I come down in that? And I think looking at other stuff here, I was never the biggest fan of the first Mad Max movies. I saw the appeal. I get why it was something that did get the ability to come back to over and over again, and why George Miller was just allowed to full stop do whatever he wanted with this movie. I really, really enjoy it, but I do think that there is, for me at least, not a huge temptation to come back to it over and over and over again. Like when I give something a 10, it's something that I could just sit down and watch at any point. Like it's always going to be something that I am absolutely for. This one, I feel like it's going to, like I'm going to need to let it fade out of my mind a little bit and then come back to in order to fully enjoy all of it again. Barring that one soundtrack song, because I'll play that just nonstop for the rest of my life now. But beyond that, I think I'm going to just barely shy give this one a 9.5. Not to knock it in any meaningful way. It's just, I don't know, something in it just doesn't quite grab that 10 for me.
It's so weird the way you framed that, because you came at it from this angle of having to defend the fact that you weren't going to give it a 10. So it was all like, yeah. I'm giving it a 9.5, but here's all the reasons why it's not a 10. I'm going to say it's a 9.5, and I'm not going to justify that and say, oh, here's why it's not a 10.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to say, no, it's fantastic. It is an excellent action movie. It could rise for me to a 10, maybe over the years, potentially. But I'm happy to say that having not seen it I think I saw it like twice in 2015. Like I saw it a couple of times, but I haven't seen it since 2015. Coming back to it now, it holds up. It might even arguably be better. Like it's held up that well. The pacing's so good. The action scenes are spectacular. They're riveting. The characters are simple enough. They're not overly complex, but they're simple enough, and you understand them. It's exciting to see the two main characters like sort of bond and start working together. It's fun to see them fight before that as well. That's a great little scene. Everything is great. The villain is the most hateful prick. You root for his demise, and he gets a violent, painful death, and it's glorious. What a glorious day. All right?
Bravo. You did it.
So, wonderful. It's a 9.5. It is a special film, and like it almost, like, one of the things going into Furiosa that's almost like going against it is that it's impossible, nigh on impossible, that it could, like, it will be a victory if we come out of Furiosa and go, oh, that was really good, like 8 out of 10, because coming after something of this level, which instantly everyone said, oh, that was special, like this is an instant classic, there's no debate in this, we all agree that was a phenomenal film that stands out in 2015, we're in the middle of like Marvel Cinematic Universe mania, right? Yeah. If it's not that, it's Michael Bay Transformers movies. There's a lot of very samey things happening, and this stuck out amongst the crowd, and it still does. So, I
mean, you and I both know how the Oscars feel about sci-fi movies. Like, they don't give a whole lot of care. The fact this got nominated 11 times at the Oscars, clearly it was doing something right there.
Well, you can thank Dark Knight for them saying, okay, everyone was mad that Dark Knight didn't get nominated for Best Picture, so now there's 10 nominees every year. Because I don't think it would have got nominated if it wasn't for that fact. But it at least means that they get to put in one or two of these types of movies where we're never going to give it the win, but at least you get to say the good sci-fi movie got nominated.
For Best Picture, I agree with that. But I also think the fact that it even got Best Director, like they recognize the artistry behind it, even though it's not something they normally would.
That's a very good point. I think all the technical awards, that's the stuff that tends to go to these type of movies, or at least nominated. Director's the one that stands out of being like, no, that's actually kind of special that it got into that, because it's still only 5 options. They could have easily have picked just 5 other movies, but they did throw this in here. So, I can't argue with that point. So, just before David gets to his homework, I'll just tell everyone you can get more shows from us over at Patreon if you want to support the content and help keep it all coming. There's bonus shows for the horror movie podcast that I do with Tim. There's other stuff, but for specifically me and David, there's 2 bonus shows that we do monthly on Patreon. All patrons get access to the Criterion Cut, which is where we review a movie from the Criterion Collection. And then there's also Extra Reels, which is the $5 tier and up, which is where we review some of the worst movies of all time. Hopefully so bad they're good. But, we've done Neil Breen, we've done Miami Connection, we've done Troll 2 recently. A whole host of things.
Fun. Yeah.
You love it. You love it.
I love it in the fact that talking about it is fun. But every once in a while, there's a movie that watching it is just heart-wrenchingly awful. And it takes something out of me every time we hit one of those. I am not going to forgive you for the David Dakota films. If we ever come back to more of those, I'm done.
F.
God damn
it. You ignorant slut, David. All right. What was your homework movie?
All right. So I decided Mad Max, I think for the first three Mad Max films, I was doing the Alien movies alongside, but obviously I had to get up to date with those before Prometheus came out, so I couldn't do that anymore with that. So I decided, hey, we've got a dystopia, we've got a society where it's all run in like a fascist sort of way. I went with the 80s classic, The Running Man.
Okay.
That's about as much as I could really tie into it. So I thought I had seen The Running Man before, and there was a bunch that was familiar to me, but I couldn't tell you how long it's been. It has been at least over like a decade and a half since I actually would have watched it. For anybody who doesn't know, Running Man is set in the far distant future of 2019, and it is a police state. You know, everything is awful, and everyone's kind of obsessed with this reality game show where criminals are put into a chance to be able to get a pardon or
it's like
whatever like that.
Lethal Gladiators, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Except it was much more mass marketed, and it's used to keep the people entertained so that they don't come after the government.
It's a classic dystopian trope, which is you turn the dark part of the society, the execution of people, into the entertainment that you feed the rest of the masses to make them think that everything's okay. There's a
yes,
yeah. I'm sure there's probably like a fancy term for it, but it's classic dystopian trope.
TV tropes definitely has a page on it.
Yeah.
But no, I enjoyed this movie. I will say very recently I did homework on They Live, and I guess mild spoilers for They Live. Both of them deal with this idea of how the media influences and how it does like darker things. It's controlling people into a more violent mindset, a much more apathetic towards the real problems going on. And I gotta say, I think They Live handled that better. This one was a lot more fun. This one was a lot more entertaining the whole way through.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't think this is trying to be a serious movie. This is trying to be a fun Arnold sci-fi movie. And on that, I love it. Sub-Zero, now Plane Zero. It's such a bad line, but he sells it so well.
See, that's the thing.
Remember when you talked about They Live? I said there's the famous line about the bubblegum and kicking ass, and how it's a great line, but he kind of delivers it really awkwardly. This is the opposite. Yeah. This is a bad line, but Arnold gives it his all, and it becomes amazing.
Oh yeah, no, I agree that he gives it his all, but I did listen to your guys' review on this. I agree with Tara. I think the lines are like a bit too forced. It feels like this movie, more than any other Arnold movie I've seen, is just how many one-liners can we fit in one script?
Not enough. That's the answer. Not enough.
I guess. But no, I did enjoy it. I thought it was a fun little time. I do kind of wish it would have went a little further in its sociopolitical stuff, but again, that's just my taste in things. I enjoy my dystopia with a screw the Reagan years kind of twist to them.
I like that too, but I like what Running Man is for what it is. Villain's great as well. The game show host, he's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he did a great job of showing how people can get attached to a personality sort of thing, and it'll allow them to excuse whatever because the personality is telling them it's okay to do so. And that is, of course, very relevant in modern times as well. So, I enjoyed the movie. I do think there were some flaws with it, but it was a good, dumb fun the whole way through. So overall, I'd say it's probably just like a straight 7 for me. It's not something that I have a huge attachment to, but it was fun. I'm not going to say that it wasn't like above average by any means.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right, there you go. Another homework movie in the bag. Next week, we will be doing... Oh, Furiosa's next week? Oh, I didn't realize that we were scheduling Fury Road so close to it. So
we had to hit that algorithm, man. People are Googling, what the hell's a Mad Max?
Well, that actually means that Furiosa was out like yesterday when this goes out. So...
True.
Oh, no, because this is Ace. This is not Collector's Cut, so that's not true.
Right. So it's coming out
a few
later
days.
This week. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you all enjoy Furiosa and join us next week to hear an in-depth discussion of said film. For us, it's actually like a month and a half, like in advance. But that's fine. Whatever.
I'm sure that there's going to be some sort of weird like critics thing that comes up beforehand that either says it's great or it's awful, and we got to deal with that.
Yeah, the consensus from the critics might already be out by the time this goes out, and so maybe we sound a little out of date, but let it be known, we're recording this in the past, so we don't know yet.
Knowing how people usually react to critics, I'll just take the safe bet. How dare they say that? You know? It's like these critics, they don't understand anything anymore.
I mean, Fury Road reviewed very well, so...
Good on those critics. They really got the heartbeat of America going in with them.
Are you hoping I'm going to edit out whichever one's wrong?
No, I'm just playing both sides and hoping people don't remember the other one.
That's fine. All right, that's the show, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching Science Fiction and Computer at Salsa.